Automation is a full-time job. Sometimes I call it
It's
automation
a
is a full.
living organism, right?
You have a problem in one system, that means you have a problem in all system, or you don't have a problem at all. That's how it should be. If
Yeah,
you're really
yeah.
like a coded correct, it's going to show up
Hmm.
everywhere as a problem, or it's not going to show up anywhere.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Tekitok podcast, where we embark on a journey through the ever-evolving realm of SAP and IT operations, automation, artificial intelligence, and cloud technologies. Whether you're an IT professional, a business leader, or simply curious about emerging technologies and industry insights, our episodes will be your compass in navigating this dynamic landscape with real-world experiences. Join us as we demystify complex concepts, explore innovative trends, and engage in stimulating dialogue with industry experts to empower you with insights that matter. The views expressed by our hosts and guests are their own and do not reflect the opinions of their respective companies. The producer of this Techie Talk podcast assumes no responsibility for any public content, ideas, or recommendations shared.
It's Techie Talk, where we talk about everything IT, especially around SAP, cloud, security, everything else. And today I have a really special guest here, my good friend Anbu. And Anbu and I go back years with SAP. We've been in the trenches together, right, Anbu? We fought
Yes, we
many
are.
battles, slayed a lot of dragons. And I think between us, we probably have over 50 years of hands-on SAP in all kinds of. You go back to like IBM days, right, Ambu?
I do. I mean, I started in IBM back in '97, I want to say. So spent about 20 years with IBM practicing SAP. Then took about
Uh-huh.
a middle of 1 year. Then I was in Nutanix practicing SAP, basically like leading the pre-sales operation there. And then from there, I moved to Microsoft for about last 5 years, practicing
Wow.
SAP on Azure.
So if you want to know about all the AI, that generative AI hot stuff, that Anbu's the right guy right there. He, right? Everybody's
Yeah.
talking about that stuff. I can't believe how many customers ask me about that stuff all the time. So anyway, so today I think we have a very, very special topic dear to our hearts. I think we're talking about how to plan for a successful cloud migration, and we're gonna talk, general best practices. So I think between Anbu and myself, I think working on all these different customer engagement from the very beginning, from pre-sales, right, all the way through to deployment and helping customer operate the environment. I think we can share some nuggets of wisdom, if you will, and that will be very helpful for, I think, our audience. So again, I think we need to dive in, and then sometimes if the topic gets too big, we have opportunity to always have follow-on episodes. I think our Techie Talk is taking on. We already took on 4 episodes of Rise, which was a very popular topic. So let me get started then. I guess from my perspective, I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about, maybe ask Anbu here. The first motivation for customers to why they want to migrate and why it's relevant, and perhaps I can show while we're talking about this. This is a definitive guide to migration, right? So folks see my screen. We published this one for anybody to download, and it's really to talk about like the mindset you have to get into when you start thinking about migration. It's one of the complex things in SAP because you don't do it often enough, especially. Hopefully, not every year you're doing migration. So it's complex. So then, therefore, you have to first of all understand the reason why you want to migrate. What are the motivation? And so what we talk about is like what drives an organization to move to the cloud, right? So what have you seen, Anbu, as far as some of the big customers you work with? What is the main motivation?
Right. I mean, that's a great question. I mean, there are a number of reasons why customer wants to come to the cloud. And if I really rewind a bit, 5 years back, probably people are asking why cloud. Then they were saying when cloud. Now why now? I mean, it's almost like now is where they are at. Why now? Let's talk about that. I mean, the main driver is the whole cloud economics is makes sense. Absolutely, there's for any workload. It doesn't have to be pertinent to the SAP workload, especially when you come to the SAP workload along with the cloud economics. And take, for example, an S4 HANA. S4 HANA is really the transformation project. It is not a lift and shift project in most of the cases. In those scenarios, and pinning down on the sizing is become a really like very
Mm-hmm.
tedious exercise. We
Mm-hmm.
have customer who start with really thinking that I probably need about 6 terabyte. Then soon by the time they go live, and then they're already on 12 terabyte. Now they're already marching towards 24 terabyte, and there are
Wow.
customers who are asking even beyond that. So we have a lot of customers in 24 terabyte club now, and then we
Yeah.
do have a lot of customers. And to spice it up, there are customers who are on 24 terabyte with a scale out as well. You can imagine the magnitude in which the sizing is changing as they roll out, as they bring more functionality into the S4 HANA. The whole scenario is much more complex. If I have to just
Mm-hmm.
rewind myself and go back to my on-prem world, on-prem days, if I have to do a sizing for this, I'm at risk. There's no way ever
Yeah.
going to get the really the
Yeah.
sizing done right. So
So
I'm
I
just
think
giving you
that's the flexibility, right? So some customer want to
yes,
go to cloud. Their main
yes,
driver may be like, I can't predict my data growth. I can't
yes,
predict my my business. And maybe I'm growing really fast, and I
right.
just need the flexibility to be able to meet my business needs. So maybe that's a driver. So again, we talk about like what is the motivation, and what is this motivation important? Because obviously, if you're designing a cloud migration, you need to think about the drivers. So if we're thinking, if I need flexibility, I need to design in the architecture ways to resize. I can do this. If I'm looking at fluctuating workload, like maybe I don't need this all the time, but I need to size up during month end. Then you need to design that into, okay, do I have a process to automate resizing my system for a week and then resize it back down? And then what is that cost involved, right? Because like I don't want to get a bill that like fluctuates like this. But if
Correct.
you know that going in for flexibility, you need that, then it's not a surprise, right? So some of these are
Exactly.
important when we talk about designing. So the other question that since we've done several episodes on Rise, and I'll just talk about this, we don't need to go into it, but like one of the other motivation customers saying, hey, you know what, I don't have the staff anymore. I just want to turn over and migrate my system to the cloud and be managed by SAP Rise or whatever, because they take care of the infrastructure. So that's another reason. It's not going to talk about like some of these areas, because now you're turning over management of it to either, like before, a managed service provider might say, I will take over and I'll manage your systems for you. So there, you're migrating, right? So some of those are driver, but also speed, right? Sometimes customers just running out of juice. They need something bigger, faster, and just be able to
Quicker
move.
automation that
Yeah,
changes the
yeah,
whole world. I mean,
yeah.
if you
Mm-hmm.
think about it, I mean, the customers are probably, take a system copy for a minute. It takes about like, quite a bit of chunk of time in your schedule on a
Oh
daily
yeah,
basis, on a,
yeah.
on a, on your project plan. When you look at it, there are two things that's going to dominate the most: system copy and patching. If I
Oh
have
yeah.
both automated and do it in the cloud way, you're going to see a drastic difference in the approach itself. It's not that
Anbu,
you can't.
I think you just named two more episodes.
Right.
system
Think about
system
it. I
copy
mean,
and patching.
right. I mean, think about it. I mean, you can do that. I mean, do a great level of automation even in the on-prem. I don't want to say that you can't do it. It's
Mm-hmm.
just that become such a tedious exercise, and probably you need a bubble hardware. There is so much complexity goes around it. I don't need to really deal with all of that. I can really like
Right.
do that in a
Right.
more efficient way in the cloud. I can really size it up and get the thing moving faster than then size it down the way you said it. Think of this way as the platform itself is a really innovation, right? When I say
Mm-hmm.
platform, there's nothing wrong in the on-prem. It works really great. I mean, if that's all you
Mm-hmm.
need, you got it. But what else I could do? When you have that question, what else is there in the platform is what you can get.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas when you come to the cloud
Yeah.
platform in hyperscaler, you start looking at it and say, oh, I can really take advantage of the PaaS offering, SaaS offering. So you start looking at the ecosystem. When the customer looks at it and say, I can truly innovate, I no longer really bound by my
Mm-hmm.
physical
Mm-hmm.
boundary where I'm at. It's no longer
Right.
just a pure data center where you are getting the iOS component, right? Those are the things that are pretty highlighting things when customer really talk to us. They say, okay, I see my future here, not just really
Yeah.
migration, not just my current project. I can also see my future here. That's how the customers are landing on cloud.
So when they put a statement together, their motivation to go to cloud. Obviously, it drives a lot of things. It drives the costs, it drives the effort, and also the design, right? So, for instance, if a customer says, today I'm on-prem, I'm happy, but I just don't have a DR, I don't have business continuity because I'm not structured, or maybe it's very costly. And I really want to go to cloud because now I need to be able to run my business with higher resiliency, with disaster recovery, given the latest issue around weather and things like that, whatever the reason is. But if they say something like that, it drives a substantial amount, don't you think, in your experience, a substantial amount of the design criteria, right? Because let's say I want
Absolutely.
my system to be able to run in alternate region, and for disaster recovery or maybe just business continuity, I need to be running over here and then some workload over here. That design could be drastically different than not having that.
Absolutely correct. I mean, if you want to
Okay.
think about that way, there are two scenario happens there. The large customer probably have too many data centers, and then they want to consolidate and make it really more streamlined, pick a really the strategic location in the globe, and then start operating from there. So they're able to consolidate and get rid of like hundreds of data center into few. That's one way of doing it. Come to the Azure region, and then you're able to do that. The other way to look at it is there are customers who haven't really had beyond a specific region. Now their DR posture probably a lot more weaker. Can I really have latch onto the one more region and have a really proper spread for my DR? That's something that you see both. You see both with the customers.
Yeah. So I kind of shown this a little bit more, setting the business objective as kind of the core, and then the core drives a lot of things like the total cost of ownership. What questions to ask? Like, okay, what problems are you trying to solve? What benefits you trying to get out of this? And what kind of computing model are you going with? Like something that is very static and you pay upfront for reserve instance, or you going to something that's more flexible, dynamic, that you want to size, upsize, and change instances every time there's a new class of system come out. You may want to go to the latest and greatest because your business needs that. All of this drive and these questions are so important, because I remember sitting with customer during design phase for the migration, like asking these questions, and believe it or not, they didn't really have it in their mind. They thought, I just want to migrate. But then when you ask, okay, this is going to determine my design. If you don't design for it, later on, you're not going to get it, or you're going to have to retrofit. And you don't want to do that when you just move to something brand new and you say, oh, I can't do that because it wasn't designed into the scope or the architecture. So it's quite important, right, to think about like, okay, how much downtime can I restore so I can design resiliency? How much, operational end-to-end process, how much something needs to process. Let's say in a business process, we don't think about it when we do the technical migration, but it's important. If you're going to move to something and your business process, let's say right now on-prem runs, I don't know, let's say you run payroll and it takes 8 hours, or you run month end, it takes 48 hours. But your objective is, I need to run this thing in 1 hour and my month end to be done in 12 hours. That's a very valid objective, right? But that has to get translated to the design. It doesn't happen automatically, right? Yeah.
Right. I mean, what you called out as the business outcome is a super critical. We have, I mean, it's so important that we capture the business outcome for the business. What is the state where they are in? What is the state they want to be? And what is really the way to get there? All that is super critical. Unless we capture and prepare the whole thing part of the customer journey, it's going to really have a really some kind of really a disconnect, right? And it's super critical. I mean, I completely agree. Business outcome is super critical.
Yeah. So leading to that, I say, okay, once you know why you're going, I think you need to then establish some basic KPIs, right? I mean, okay, like I said before, what if it's response time? What is, better this, better that? Whatever it is, that needs to happen as kind of going in, having some KPI, and then understanding how that KPI is going to get measured, and then putting in some basic even dashboard or process, so that while you are going through the cloud journey, you're able to then say, hey, this is not meeting my KPI. I need to tweak and tune or redo something. At least then you have an established set of metrics. Otherwise, you are deploying, costing money, but you have no way of showing management or business that I'm spending this money because, look, I got better at KPI. Look, you want this and you got this. So that's one of the things I think the next step is, once you know why you're going, what are some priorities, is to define some KPIs around this. Kind of want to turn to you, Anbu, and ask a little bit on where do you get started on a planning a migration? It's such a huge undertaking, especially for large customers. And some of
Right.
you, your projects, I know, and myself as well. Some of the customers have like 100 SAP systems and 2,000 VMs. We're talking huge, and it can be overwhelming, right? So, how do we approach something like this typically in your experience?
Absolutely. I mean, if I want, I can share my screen a
Yeah,
little bit
go ahead. Go ahead.
and
Thank you.
show some of the approaches. For example, I mean, I just want to take this is our documentation main page where we have documented everything comes out of engineering. This is our
Mm-hmm.
official engineering source for Azure. And over here, we have a deployment guide where there is a deployment checklist where we talk about how do we plan for migration. There is a planning phase where partner like you are extremely involved along with really the chief architect and customer. You want to say customer side of the house, and everybody is really on the same room. Sometimes even SAP, and then the goal is to go through the high level design and break it down. One of the things that we go through
Right.
for the migration is even the migration groups, right? How am I going to
Mm-hmm.
group the application that are belong to the migration? If you have really like, I jokingly say, if you want to, if your task is to eat an elephant, you're going to chunk it and eat. You're not going to eat the whole thing in one shot. It's never going to happen, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
it's just
Yeah, yeah.
overwhelming. So the
You can
same
try.
way,
You're not going to be
you,
successful at it.
yeah, you're not going to be very successful, right? The same way you have to really like spread it also meaningful such a way that spread the risk, spread the really the grouping, and all that is what we go through. And
Mm-hmm.
some of the time you find out sometimes you're lucky. When I say you're lucky, customer would have done some on-prem data center migration. They would have done in a particular way, or they would have done some upgrades. They would have done massive projects where they would have done some
Mm-hmm.
grouping already. Take
Yeah.
that grouping as a reference. From there, you elaborate and see what makes sense. How am I going to really group them together and create a move group?
Okay.
That's one way to do it. And you
Right.
create a high level design, you go to the technical design, and then it's all paper exercise and then understanding various. There are a lot of, I'm not going to drain you with all the things, but it's all
Yeah.
well
So I'm making
documented.
an assumption, right? I mean, in order to
Yeah.
group something, the customer, one of the important thing is to first discover what is in scope for this migration, right?
Correct.
Some of them will have a spreadsheet. Some of them might have something live. They can show you maybe the ITSM system or
Right.
IT asset management. But we need to start somewhere, right?
Yes.
Without that, we can't start grouping. So let's say we typically talk in SAP term, like, okay, how many production system do you have, and how many system is in each of these landscape? Do you have a 7 system landscape, or 5, or 3 system? And then we start getting them into somewhat of a list. So what's in scope, right? And then from that, we know, okay, now we can group. This one need
Yes.
to move with this one. It's very often that customer will say, this system cannot run without that system. They will know. They will tell us, right?
There you go. Yes. And then it's a group exercise. You do that, then coming to cloud, if you are already mature in Azure, then you're going to be a lot easier. If you're not mature, you're new to the Azure, there will be like a cloud adoption framework to go through, get the plumbing work, all the foundational work done, which is basically getting your VNet,
The foundation,
NSG,
right?
whatnot.
Yeah.
All your cloud foundation is done. It takes its own time. Once it's done, then you run some pilot project. The goal why we want to do the pilot project is really where you're going to test a lot of your things, a lot of your assumption that you made in your planning phase. You take
Right.
this really unique scenario, the complex scenarios, run them through the pilot, and see whether you're able to measure it. And then that's really your early opportunity to quickly fine tune. So there are quite a bit of all that is already documented, what needs to go
So
there.
this is. Let me just take a step for our audience. This is something like, let's say, for instance, we already identified a group of systems, and we say, okay, I have, let's say, a production ERP and a production BW and a production CRM, something. So you need some copy of the system so you can do a pilot, pretty much like, let's take a copy and put it in cloud and see how it works, and what was the challenge of migrating this one copy of the system. So you're not impacting real production yet. We're just creating something so that you can play with. Okay, excellent.
And then you go through the compute, storage, network, you do all of that. And then I want to tie back to one that you had it in your document, which talks about really the KPIs. So sometimes customer does say that I want to really define some success criteria, go measure the success criteria and see how am I performing in the cloud. When they do that, you will start really seeing fundamentally like, here's where my current state and here's my target state. and they're able to draw the contrast and say, here are the areas that I'm doing really well, here are the area that I need some additional help, and we are able to do all that and then get through. That's what this phase is. This is where
Okay.
you gain a tremendous confidence, right? Confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And think about it. Planning
Right.
phase is all about paperwork, and pilot is where you really put your hand and do it with the real system. And
Yeah.
you are now very close. At this point, you're kind of in a stage to unleash and say, let's go through the whole thing now in a phased manner as a program.
Okay. Okay. So typically, we would see in the deployment of what you piloted, after some refinements, you have now a design that you can now go ahead and say, okay, we've architected it, we've tested, and then we refine it. We have some design. We're gonna go ahead and start deploying the first group of systems in, maybe a non-production sandbox training, whatever it is. So that's the kind of non-production phase where you're gonna. I think there's two school of thought. One, somebody say, why don't we go and do it, the whole landscape? Let's say I do all ECC, or I do all whatever. The school of thought typically most customer go with is that they will do one biggest thing as a pilot, so they know what the biggest hardest thing is. But then they go tech and on and do the lower system, so like development or sandbox or training, because then that gives you learning experience to run this thing, right, for a while before you actually get to do it in production, right? So that's the school of thought, is group these systems so that when you do the non-production, you do the less critical ones, so that you can actually have more learning experience and operating it, and stopping it, starting it, backing it up, monitoring it, all kinds of things that needs to happen when you launch the system on the cloud, right?
Exactly. I mean, just small things like if you think about it, in the on-prem world, we had a storage admin, network admin, you have a virtualization admin, there are several admins. Whereas when you come to cloud, what do you have? You have a cloud admin. All
Mm-hmm.
that is mushed together as a single role. There is a
Mm-hmm.
transformation happening on the structural side. There is a transformation happening on the operation side. There is a transformation happening on how you operate or interact with the system anymore. So all that is, it's an opportunity for a team to really like go through that. It's not that we need a pilot to prove
Mm-hmm.
whether the Azure is capable of running Azure, the SAP
Mm-hmm.
or not. It's just
Mm-hmm.
more of the whole ecosystem to come together and be ready for the mega event, which is your
Mm-hmm.
production migration. And if you think about it, non-prod, a lot of time you don't need a HADR, but you do that in a pilot. Why am I
Mm-hmm.
doing it in pilot? I'm taking the complex scenario. Even I may take some time to do it, but if I do it right, so I have a lot of learning. Then I'm going to do a lot of non-production. Probably majority of the non-production you're going to do in a non-HA mode. When you come to the QA or pre-prod or business simulation, where you would introduce a HA maybe. Then when you come to production, you're going to introduce a DR on top of it. So you see there
Mm-hmm.
is a stages of complexity is growing,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then
Mm-hmm.
so prior you get into all of that, you get the platform related things out of the way by just going through the initial stages. So it's super
Mm-hmm.
important that customer really prepare spend a decent amount of time to really make sure that they are understood what are the architectural decisions that they are taking in the early stages of
Mm-hmm.
the migration. Those
That
architectural decisions are going to play a key role.
Yeah, that reminds me. The planning phase is so critical, because I remember really on a migration project, spending months in the planning phase to do the architecture design phase. So first you plan what you're gonna do, what's the scope and all that. But in the design and architecture design, the I would say it's a double-edged sword when you go to cloud, and it's like, oh, it's great, it's new, it's like a lot of flexibility. The come with that is that there are so many options, right? Okay, well, let's talk about storage. There's so many options of storage. And we talk about network, how to lay out the network. There are so many options. Or what kind of virtual machines? There are so many options, right? We go to SAP certified list of machines that you can use for certain workload. There are so many options. So having a lot of option is like a kid in the candy store, right? You're like, I want this, I want this. But at some point, and you don't remember, like maybe some architecture sessions we sit in, it's like analysis paralysis. The more option we provide, the longer it took for the customer to decide what to do. And this is where you go back to, why are you migrating in the first place? Because then you need to bring out those statements, say, what do I need to design for? And I need to agree on a design quickly, and not be stuck in this thing. Because something as simple, I remember something as simple as what is the naming convention for virtual machine names, or what is a naming convention for volumes for file systems. These things sound like trivial,
It
but
can take time.
it took time, right? So I think that's something I remember. If you got to plan that in there and say, okay, there needs to be some kind of almost like the referee, right? Needs to like, hey, let's move on. Let's decide and move on, because you can change it a little bit later. Something you can change, something are harder to change. But I find that in the design phase, yes, it's good to explain how things work, what options are, but at some point you need to design that is get like
No, you
locked
called
down.
out, yeah, you called out such a finer detail. Let's talk about the naming convention. It sounds really like, aesthetic, but it is not. From the operation standpoint, when a guy get a call at 2 a.m. in the morning that some system is down, if I have a meaningful name, right there you can jump on it and say, okay, that's my sandbox, that's my production, that's my development.
Hmm.
You can really interpret so many things and then act on it accordingly. So
Oh yeah.
it's super important that you establish some ground rules. Whatever you have it in
Hmm.
on-prem, you can really pretty much adapt, but you have to probably
Hmm.
build a lot more for the newer services that you are not exposed to in the
Hmm.
on-prem world. Now you're in the cloud, you're required to really do those things as well. So to your point,
Hmm.
you're absolutely right. I mean, these are the
Hmm.
things I call it architectural decisions. I mean, go through the architectural
Yeah.
decisions and
Yeah.
start closing out sooner and faster. Then it's going to really get you there faster, right?
Yeah, and I find like this document, the structure you have is really good, because I know Microsoft does a super job in documenting all of these different architecture and decisions and things like that, things to take into consideration. And this is where I think it's important in the migration project. Very critical is having an experienced architect who can guide you, right? Because again, you get too much information, the customer cannot decide. They're gonna lean back to the architecture, the
Partners.
project team that has experience, and say, hey, the partner, and say, hey, you guys know best. You've done it so many times. What's the best thing? I'm gonna trust you to, guide us to that point. So that's, I think, is very easy to do when you trust, you have this relationship with the partner that's doing it, and the architect. Because I think that's actually a part of a major success criteria of a project, is that if you just have a poorly designed architecture because somebody didn't go through our scenarios, later on when you find our problem, then you have to backtrack and trying to figure out and fix it. And so
Right.
I think it's better to get the really experienced, good documentation, and then present the case, decide, and move on. I think that was very critical to a lot of the projects, why it was successful in the cloud migration. We didn't have to go back and rework. There is always some amount of rework, because that's how agile framework is, right? You put some MVP out there. I put a pilot systems. I tweak it. I tune it. I kick it around. I find, oh, you know what? I need to tweak this a little bit to work a little bit better. Maybe like for high availability, if I do a test and it took longer to fail over because I didn't do this, or I didn't tweak this parameter, I need to go back and tweak that. So even though the cloud platform, the documentation provide us with all this documentation on what to set,
Correct.
how to set it, but it's ultimately up to your threshold, your setting, your customize, your preference, that drives what you're gonna set and how it's gonna behave, right? So I think that's also important. Um,
Absolutely. I mean, to your point, Len, I mean, if I take just a pacemaker with HSR,
mhm,
pretty
mhm,
much we call out every steps. These are all not just a document. These are
mhm.
really a validated solution on our end.
Right,
We
right.
constantly validate it every time we release, and every time there's a really, I mean, as you can see, this parameter typically is 1 in most of the cases, whereas in
Mhm,
Azure you have to set it to 0. So we
mhm.
call out all of that pretty clearly. So
Yeah.
even it takes some time to go through, but trust me, it's all really like as you go through one
Mhm,
system, two system, and then probably you're going to do it manually at the beginning, then slowly you're going to indulge into more automation as you really like, either you adapt automation coming from the partner or you create your own.
mhm,
In either scenario, all this is become really a less of the things to worry about and get tucked into
mhm,
your automation. Then
mhm.
okay, let's assume that I put everything into automation. Now what is my end state? Is it, am I comply with really the lot of standard that's coming out of the cloud team, or that's coming out of really the SAP and all that?
Right.
Then
Mhm,
now we have to type back. So what we have done there is there are the two-sided challenge, right? And then one side is, okay, I have to get it everything right, I got it. Then we have something like quality check that we
Oh
deliver as
yeah.
a open source asset. We
Mhm,
recommend all the customer to go run it. When they run it, it's going to really like scan your system, come back and generate a really fancy report where it's going to tell you here are the deviations, right? If you
Yeah, yeah.
really look at the quick
This is
results,
extremely useful. I mean, it's just like you take a car into mechanic. You want to run a 100-point inspection, right? You need to take this and
exactly.
inspect it, make sure that all the settings are correct, or at least to best practices. I mean, the same thing we do with for SAP, right? Let's say you deploy HANA, you're gonna have to run the HANA mini check to find out all the settings have been set properly and sizing of I/O and throughput and all that stuff. So like the what is it? The HANA cloud measurement tool, right?
HCMT, yeah,
Also,
HCMT.
yes, that's also important. Many customers don't know that to go production, you need supposed to go through that at least for the production system. Make sure
Correct.
that the tool passes. Otherwise, you might have issues with I/O and performance on things like log volumes and things like that. So yeah, this quality check. I remember there's a lot of effort and the engineers put into this. This is a great tool. I remember when we first started on Azure, we didn't have it like this. So that comes to a point where I'm asking, in terms of the project itself. Okay, so now we have a plan, we have a scope of things, we have a set of KPIs that kind of track business priorities, and then we group systems, we build them, we throw them into a pilot, we test it, and then we say, okay, now let's do a deploy. But I think we come to the part where I find to be the glue in a lot of this is like the tooling, right, Anbu? Especially for migration projects. Sometimes you go to customer, they don't have anything. I mean, and by tooling, I mean even basic things like okay, you have a very good runbook site from the cloud vendor with all the documentation, but yours is going to be your version of it, right? Like let's say we took some naming convention, we're going to do. The tooling can include things like how do you document this? There must be a central run book where we document how to deploy something, etc., right? Tooling could be automation, could be scheduling of things like backups, whatever it is, readiness checks. Like this one is a tool also. So, Anbu, maybe you can share some of your
Sure,
experience
sure,
and how.
absolutely. I mean, this is one of the top challenge, right? I mean, as you really let's assume that people are really a mixed skill set. Some of them are really savvy with Azure. Some of them are really like still kicking tires,
Mhm,
and some of them still
mhm,
really in the distance and whatnot. And but everybody's interacting with the system. Over a
mhm,
period, the drift can happen. The consistency is going to be really the bigger problem. So, plus that's not how you interact with the cloud either. So, given all that scenarios of packets of issues that can stem up and packets of things that you can solve in a more efficient way, automation is going to play a central role. And people pick
mhm,
the automation. There are company like yourself has a really excellent automation, and there are other
mhm,
vendors have a really excellent automation. And even on Azure Native, we also provide some automation framework. So there are plenty of choice for the customers. They can really
mhm, mhm.
take the one that really suit the best for them, and then start that journey even part of the pilot, preferably in
Yeah,
part of the
yeah.
pilot, and
It's
then
important in the
go.
beginning.
Yes,
Yeah.
and the more you go the automation, once you take architectural decision and code it inside your automation, now you're going to get the repeated behavior. You're no longer going to debate on your
Mhm,
decisions anymore. Your decisions are made. If you ever have to adjust, you can always come back and iterate. And most of these automations, especially the Ansible, has a really a kind of end state. It has a really the
mhm,
end state. I mean, it can really you can go on, iterate on it. Let's say you
mhm,
really threw some of the configuration into your system. Now you come back
mhm.
and say, I want to make some modification to the configurations. Ansible is capable of doing that. So Terraform is also
Yeah,
another
yeah.
one capable of doing that. I mean, so the
So,
desired state
Andrew,
configuration is something. Yep.
what percentage you see the customers now when they go cloud, that how important is they putting on emphasis of like infrastructure as code, right? Because we take automation for granted because we do it kind of like as the first thing that comes to my mind. It's like when I deploy many things, I want to automate it. For many reasons, whether it's for consistency or whether it's to save time or to also lack of skilled people to do it manually or whatever the reason is. But automation is always like my first priority. But what do you see in like customers that you've dealt with? How
See,
important
automation, I
is
mean,
customization?
right. I mean, that's a great question. I mean, automation start with establishing the automation framework, which is really automation infrastructure.
Mm-hmm,
Then how you're going to really orchestrate. Let's assume that you got that established very first time and
mm-hmm,
working all good. But
mm-hmm,
cloud years are dog years. The rate
mm-hmm,
in which we make a change to our best practice or really like a it's like a magnitude wise is really pretty high. So given
Yeah.
that there is a best practice catch up, so automation is sometimes can turn around to be a full-time job where you have to keep up with the best practices. The
Hmm.
best practice that we created 5 years back and the best practice that we say today are definitely changing. Whether the newer
Definitely.
capabilities and better capabilities that keep coming in literally in a
Right.
very frequently, like
Yeah.
very frequently
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
coming in. So
Mm.
automation is a full-time job. Sometimes I call it
It's
automation
a
as a full.
living organism, right?
Yes, it's not something that you do it one time and then it's going to really repeat it for you forever. No, it is going to do
Hmm.
that as long as the baseline doesn't change. As soon as the baseline changes, now you have to adapt, and there is really the constant iterative process that goes through. So, what I want to look at it, I want to look at it. If you're a customer sitting there, invest on a good automation framework from the get go, whatever it is, whether
Right.
it's Azure native or partner,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
then dedicate
Hmm.
quality time in deciding that and making sure that's really set up right. That's
Yeah.
going to save a lot of time, and it's going to
Hmm.
bring a really, like, I jokingly say you have a problem in one system, that means you have a problem in all system, or you don't have a problem at all. That's how it should be. If
Yeah.
you're really
Yeah.
like a coded correct, it's going to show up
Hmm.
everywhere as a problem, or it's not going to show up anywhere.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's very
Yeah. I
easy to catch
remember
it.
even like find me the systems that have this particular attribute set this particular way, right? You must have an automated way to go onto like 1,000 VMs and find out, okay, I have this kernel tunable set this way. So, it was done from automation, so it's consistent. So I can go fix my automation and redeploy it and either
Right.
go and update this attribute. Something as simple as that is very critical. I think
Very powerful.
yeah, I think your framework question is. I think your answer is very critical to me. I find that it doesn't matter what it is. I mean, if you put in enough time and effort and train the team to wrap their head around automation as the core, you can make anything work. But not having it and then going to try to do it halfway through is hard, right? Because people are now they're busy. So if you got a guy and you're just saying, hey, you're deploying systems manually, following this manual run book, and then doing this manually, and halfway through you're telling him, throw it all out. I've got this automation. Some vendor came in. And, he doesn't feel good now because it's like he invested the time, and now he has to learn this other thing which he doesn't understand. You'd rather start that journey at the beginning,
Soon
right?
enough.
That's great.
Establish.
So
I mean, establish automation, and most important, even this is also a bit of a cultural change in some organization where you probably have to empower the automation to go across the various departments. The reason why
yeah.
I say that, if we take a really piecemeal approach and say that I have automation for my team, and each person starts saying that, then it's become a really segmented exercise. And you want to really have a
I agree.
DevOps. Yeah, the DevOps team needs to be somewhat
Hmm.
empowered with really
Hmm.
the enough access, but that doesn't
Hmm.
mean the other teams doesn't have a role, and they are the SMEs who's going to really feed the automation team to be successful. And it
Very
is really
true.
the joint collaborative exercise where
Yeah.
there is the SME scanning happens and the SME witness happening, making sure that everything is validated and whatnot. Otherwise, there is really the established coding team, which is really the DevOps team, which is really run the whole show. If you put it that way, I've seen the greater success.
Yeah, I actually can echo your thought there because I've seen recently one of our customer had a reorg and they rolled the entire SAP basis team into the cloud infrastructure team. So what basis used to say, hey, those cloud guys do deploy of VM and storage, and I don't need to worry about that. I just need to worry about my database and my basis stuff. And now they lump in together and they are on one team. And when you talk about automation, it's like it has to take care of everything, not just SAP deployment, like non-SAP application as well, right? Infrastructure, like, and let's say you have to deploy a load balancer or something. It is one common approach. It's just different use cases for each of those, as opposed to like multiple teams doing their own thing and not really using a framework. So that I think having a common framework approach and decided up front and working with that. I mean, the same thing I would say tooling, which since we're on a tooling, I want to also mention that selfishly, I think a lot of customers deploy stuff and then they don't even know that's still running. and then they get the cloud cost report after a month end, and they like, hey, that thing, somebody deployed like a huge HANA system for sandbox and didn't shut it down, and we accumulate. So to me, cost is also a very big thing, and to get around that, there has to be monitoring, of course, is also important, because you won't know something's running unless you're monitoring it. And then it's easily when somebody's getting the bill to say, hey, what is that used for, right? Oh, it's running. Okay, I need to know what is. So you need to have some way of. I remember if customers don't have a tool or approach or person designated, they could spend months trying different things. I want this dashboard. I want this nice, pretty thing, and again, at the end of the day, when you deploy these systems, you gotta hand over to operation team to run it. They need a set of tools because this is new to them, right? It's
Right.
not
I mean,
like
to your
traditionally.
point,
Yeah.
to your point, historically, the visibility to the cost was not there in the IT infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
And we are in a better state where we have a full visibility to the cost run rate. Almost everyone can have that visibility. Now, you can also set really like a number of ways you can control it, use alerts and use budget and I mean, this is really like, we constantly say to the customer, find a way to free up something here that you can use it for the next major project. It's not that you have to really like go with a mindset of, here's my fixed amount of money that I'm spending, then I have to really come up with a new budget to really do my project. Another project that I want to latch onto, not necessarily, but there are cases where customers are, when they really take advantage of all the cost optimization tools and everything out there in the Azure, you start seeing them really running more projects successfully. So it's an important pillar. It's an important pillar that I highly encourage. Very similar to automation, the customer has to really.
This is part of success, I think, to me as well, right? Deploying and managing it, and then controlling costs and knowing exactly what is consuming, so that you have this stewardship, right? Correct. It's not just about turning on everything and ignoring it and then getting a huge bill. So this is a good segment to kind of wrap up. Anbu, if you have any other insightful, we can always have additional episodes on some topics you talked about. I actually liked things like system copies and all kinds of things like that. That takes time. Technology is important, right? If you don't use the right technology, your copies are not going to be very easy or fast.
What I want to say, Lynn, I mean, 5 years back when I started, and I was, as an individual, as a practitioner, I was struggling to find a lot of resources that cohesively available to me to really consume. The times have changed. There are enough assets out there. It's just a matter of taking some time to really digest all of those assets, and then there are several forums available, and there are several communities available where you can go get participate. And of course, there are partners like you are really highly reliable and then done successfully for many years. I think customers are in a better state in deciding, picking a really right choice for their business, right? And then that's something that I call it as really the good thing that has happened over a period of the continuous adoption of the customers into the cloud. The early journeys is gone. Now we are in a really more mature journey where customer can easily latch onto it and see the success, see the time to value fairly quickly.
Yeah, and that's great, because I think now customers are asking over again, like, hey, don't I need to be, in the cloud first to, maybe have my generative AI or my machine learning or my better cybersecurity awareness and tools to protect my IT assets. All of that is possible, and the thing really is to make sure that you pick and move and do it the best way possible. So with that, I think having this episode, hopefully just a starting point. Obviously, it's a lot of concept there, but I think we hopefully can follow up with other episodes about more detail. I want to talk to you also, Anbu, eventually about things like either you or your colleagues, some of the thing about cybersecurity, etc. Especially now, October cybersecurity awareness. We're recording this in October. But in terms of SAP, what does that mean? And, how do you protect the huge amount of assets now you put on the cloud and all that stuff? So those are interesting topics to talk about as well. But I really appreciate your time. It was fun chatting to you, Anbu. And hopefully our Tekitok listeners will find this insightful, and always comment, give us additional, if you want to hear about other topics, let us know. And thank you so much, Anbu.
Thank you, Lynn, for having me here, and then nice chatting with you and meeting you after some time.
Right. Great.
We'll keep chatting. Thank you. I mean, we'll definitely
Okay.
latch onto that cybersecurity in the next session.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.